Thanks, Andrew, for that introduction, and good afternoon to you all. Australian agriculture operates in an environment of change, and that change involves changing market conditions, including consumer preference, international competition, and terms of trade, changing land conditions, and obviously we heard there will be changing and variable climate. The sector deals with technological advancements and, importantly, the policy and institutional settings. Adapting to such changes is nothing new for the sector, and the ability to adapt proactively and effectively to these changes is a characteristic of successful enterprise. The future farming in Australia will, however, be facing many varied and new challenges, including the one that Carl just alluded us to. Production and market risk management may be more necessary in the future. Understanding the past adaptation, drivers, and responses will help in meeting these future challenges and realizing opportunities in a proactive and strategic manner. To get some insights into important links between adaptation drivers, their impacts, and responses, we at ABARES have undertaken a case study on Western Australian wheatbelt. The research report on that study will be available later in this year, but today, given the time, I would like to share some of the key insights from this study, which also indicate a role for government in driving and facilitating adaptation. Why we have chosen this region for our case study? As you all know, Western Australian wheatbelt, located in the southwestern corner of the state, is the most important wheat-growing region in Australia, accounting for about 40% of Australian wheat production. The region is also important sheep meat and wool producer. Most farming businesses in the region operates mixed farming, mixed crop and livestock farms, dominated, of course, by wheat and sheep. The region is also known to have experienced and adapted to a range of significant challenges in the past, and there happens to be good quality research and data on the region as well. All these make this region a good case study region for us. In exploring the interplay between the adaptation drivers and responses, we have looked into 4 broad categories of drivers of change in farming: biophysical, market, technological, and government policies and programs. Biological drivers can include things such as highly variable rainfall with decreasing average trend and decreasing soil fertility. Regarding market drivers, we have identified volatile and declining prices of agriculture commodities, decreasing farm terms of trade with falling prices against rising cost for labor, fertilizer, fuel, and energy. Wheat production quota in the 1970s, wool reserve price schemes of the 70s and 80s, and drought support programs are a few examples of state and federal government's policy and programs that have driven change in the past. For technological drivers, I should mention the development of high-yielding varieties, disease-resistant wheat and canola varieties. Of course, various degrees of uncertainties are associated with all these drivers. Having introduced the adaptation drivers, let me now touch on 4 broad categories of adaptation responses in the WA case study. Technological and information systems, for example, trialing and adoption of new crop varieties, utilization of weather and seasonal forecasting. Examples of farming practices include diversification of crops and livestock types and varieties, changed timing of farm operations to deal with shifting growing seasons, government support for well-targeted research, development, and extension. Associated provision of information to the sector are some examples of public programs and measures. While speaking of farm financial management, we mean participation in income stabilization programs, income diversification. Having highlighted some of the key drivers and responses, let me illustrate the nature of the interplay between these drivers and responses and present a few key insights from our study in the next few slides. Here is a snapshot of wheat and barley production story of WA wheat belt. This is to demonstrate the nature of drivers and responses interactions. Let me take you back in 1960s when wool prices were falling. Growers responded by swinging towards wheat production. This adaptation response led to wheat overproduction. Coincidentally, there was also a global trend of decreased wool production and increased wheat production, resulting in falling wheat prices. The wheat supply glut and falling prices induced government to impose a wheat production quota within Australia. This is to ensure prices at least cover production cost. This production quota, in turn, acted as a policy driver for growers who responded to the market drivers of falling wheat prices and the policy driver of wheat production quota by increasing planting of barley, for example. Canola was also planted, but this is another interesting story that I will touch on later in my talk. What we can see here, though, is that many drivers, including climate drivers, can act simultaneously and interactively. And also, adaptation drivers and responses can generate some unforeseen consequences. Now we'll touch on the critical role of research and development played in boosting wheat production in Western Australian wheat belt. You may recall in 1973, Australia lost its preferential access to UK market. There were also ongoing biophysical challenges associated with pest diseases and weeds and declining soil fertility, resulting in low wheat yields. In response to these drivers, a number of breeding programs were undertaken in the 70s and 80s, supported by governments, which developed varieties suitable for Asian and Middle Eastern markets and varieties that are high-yielding, disease and pesticide resistant and tolerant of drier conditions. In the 90s, further technological improvements in agronomic practices led to farmers adopting various tilling practices, better fertilizer utilization, and better equipment. All these helped generate significant yield gains throughout the 1990s. Growers are able to better withstand rainfall variability, as well as addressing other biophysical challenges of declining soil fertility, pests, and diseases. In demonstrating the important role of extension services and information support, the WA canola story is instructive and insightful. A range of new canola varieties were developed in the 1980s. However, farmers in Western Australia didn't take up the opportunity to grow the crop. This lack of uptake occurred in spite of favorable market drivers in terms of higher canola prices against falling wool and wheat prices. Some analysts suggested that the lack of growers' confidence in the crop was due to poor performance experienced earlier with the crop, and growers not being confident in the potential of the new crop varieties. To address this lack of growers' confidence in canola, state governments in the 1980s invested in programs to deliver information on growers about the new varieties of canola and associated opportunities, provided tools to assist in achieving high yields and productivity from the crop, and also provide information and training to assist growers market their product. These adaptive responses by governments reinforced the market drivers of continued high canola prices and led to significant expansion of canola production in the WA wheat belt. This mirrored a trend across wheat growing areas within Australia. More integrated, holistic, and planned adaptation responses are likely to be more successful. But this may not be always happening, as I'm going to show. In recent years, there seems to be some evidence to suggest that farmers in WA wheat belt haven't responded effectively to certain trends in climatic conditions. As presented in these maps, the area planted to wheat during dry years is similar to, and in some areas even higher than, in high rainfall years, particularly in the inland, drier areas of the WA wheat belt. This graph of total area of wheat planted in the WA wheat belt and the growing season rainfall provides a temporal view of this apparent lack of response to climatic conditions. The Bureau of Meteorology has been publishing seasonal forecasts since 2000. According to the Bureau, model outlooks for autumn tend to be less robust than outlooks made at other times of the year. Farmers' decision about whether to plant wheat, therefore, is likely to be influenced by climatic conditions prevailing at the time of planting rather than by 3-monthly outlooks. There has been ongoing research in improving seasonal forecasting capabilities in Australia, like Paoma, you heard earlier this session, in an earlier session. Looking forward, though, some important policy questions remain. How can farmers be better equipped to respond to changing climatic conditions? How to ensure information and tools fit into decision-making tools of growers? Also, what role can government play in facilitating effective adaptation? Moving to the future needs, future Australian farming will be facing many and varied challenges and opportunities. We are talking about significant market opportunities of Australian producers in the fastest growing Asia. You heard about the market opportunities yesterday. At home, we need to deal with declining soil fertility, and you also heard a slowing down of Australian agriculture productivity growth. All these are unfolding against a growing and intense competition from our overseas trade competitors. And added to these, and you heard just a while ago, about scientific advice that our climate is becoming more variable with intensified weather extremes. Certainly, we need, among other things, a better understanding of future key drivers, adaptation responses, and their interactions. Past performance may not guarantee future success, but understanding past adaptation and performance may certainly guide our strategies for dealing with future challenges and opportunities. If you take a holistic, integrated view of risk management within agriculture, the role of government becomes quite pronounced. In particular, in understanding market failings, in facilitating targeted research, development, and extension, in provisioning quality information and decision support tools, and importantly, in ensuring a conducive policy environment for adaptation. I'm sure you'll agree all this will help realizing future opportunities. Thank you.